Well, hey, Southern Oregon, welcome back to the Real Estate Show. I'm Alice Lema. I'm your host of the show, and I'm a broker here in beautiful Southern Oregon with John L. Scott Real Estate. So glad you could join us. Today, we are so excited to welcome back Jackson County Sheriff Nate Sickler. He comes on the show every so often to bring us up to speed of what's going on, not only in the Sheriff's Department, but community-wise, and some of the updates about what's coming down the pike from the state of Oregon. We're looking forward to chatting with him about what's going on in our rural districts with cannabis, maybe get an update about the progress and ongoing conversation about homeless, as well as we want to ask him about the funding or lack of funding a couple years ago for the new Jackson County Jail. So I'm going to get all brought up to speed by Sheriff Nate Sickler here in just a little bit. In the meantime, let's check our stats real quick because we did have a change this week. We finally are starting to see a little bit of a downturn in some of our counties. So let's start with Klamath Falls. We'll do the good news first. Klamath Falls, year over year, our prices are up 7%. The average is 317,000. Now, just a reminder, that's residential. Our number of sold properties in Klamath Falls are down 37%. Our number of listings in Klamath Falls are down 8%. Again, this is year over year residential. Foreclosures, we had 0 closings for foreclosures in Klamath Falls this week and 0 short sale closures in Klamath Falls this week. Josephine County, year over year, the prices are down 7% to an average of 439,000. In Josephine County, our number of residential properties sold this week are down 28% in Josephine County. Our number of listings in Josephine County are down 21%. We have 0 foreclosures recording and closing this week in Josephine County and 0 short sales recording closing in Josephine County. Now, Jackson County, year over year residential, the prices are down 6%. Averaging 476,000 right now this week. The number of sold is dramatic. Our number of sold in Jackson County are down 45%. Our number of listings in Jackson County are down 16%. We did have a foreclosure close this week in Jackson County. We also had a short sale close in Jackson County. So those are the statistics. We'll track it every week and keep you posted. In the meantime, let's take a quick break, get a word from our sponsors. We're brought to you by John L. Scott, Ashland and Medford, the local Rogue Valley Association of Realtors, and Guy Giles, Mutual Mortgage. Do not touch that dial. We'll be right back with Sheriff Nate Sickler. Well, top of the morning, Southern Oregon, and welcome back to the Real Estate Show. We're so excited to welcome Sheriff Nathan Sickler. Welcome.
Hey, good morning. Thanks for having me.
And Guy Giles from Mutual Mortgage. Hi, Guy.
Hey, how are you?
So there's so many questions since you've been on the show, Sheriff. We just barely know where to start. And there's a lot of interesting things happening in the world that are making people nervous. And, safety and public safety is definitely something that affects real estate. So we're so happy to have you back.
All right. Well, yeah, I'll answer whatever questions I have, and fully aware of what's going on nationally and even in our state, in certain places, and some of the livability issues that everybody's dealing with, and it is concerning for sure.
So, what is it like in Jackson County right now? We don't see a lot of stuff on our local news like we do in the big cities, but what is the experience of the Sheriff's Department?
Well, we're dealing with struggles in different ways. I think one thing that is certainly out in the spotlight is some of the livability issues created by the homeless population, and how to deal with that effectively and in a way that provides a long-term success for everybody. And so that's a challenge for sure. I think the past few years, the illegal marijuana growth has been a big focal point and a big livability issue and a crime concern for our community. And through a lot of work and a lot of partnerships and a lot of diligence by county government, the sheriff's office, the Medford police, our county government, our state representatives, we've been able to get resources and get some laws changed and sort of address that. Now it's not done, and we still have work to do, but it's certainly a sight better than it was a couple of years ago. So we're thankful for that. But it just always almost seems like when one issue is prevalent, the other issues, there's just not always enough resources to go around. So, we're going to be working this fiscal year, and we've been working, but we're going to continue to work on the homeless issue and how can we make things better for the community there. And again, that's an uphill battle because, legislatively and law wise and case law wise, there's things that are not ideal. You're dealing with a very challenged population, and there's several limiting factors to dealing with this, to include housing, criminal justice resources, addiction services, mental health resources. And so it's kind of a multi-pronged approach that we need with, in my mind, being the criminal justice side of things, is the jail is a pretty important piece of that, because we don't have the ability to hold offenders in there when they do break the law, or use that as a reliable option for the chronic offenders.
Mm-hmm. How much more space would be ideal for you folks in the jail?
Well, I think, we need several hundred more beds. We put together a plan several years ago. It actually went to ballot in 2020. People may remember that, for about an 800 bed facility. And, that's, a lot of people thought, well, that's too big. You're building too big. You're asking for too much. And, we looked at different options from 500 to 600 to 800. And it really comes down to economy of scale. Obviously, when you look at building a facility, when all the infrastructure is set up to build, it makes more sense to build not only just for today, but for the future, because of the cost savings. If you have to remobilize all of your assets and all of the construction and all the things and start from ground zero again, it costs way more to build, right? At two different times than just one time. So that was a part of the consideration. Also, the supervision model and efficiency created by the size of the facility was optimized. So how many beds can we put in, or essentially how much room can we create and keep the efficiency of supervision at its maximum? And so that was done. If you go too small, you need the same amount of staffing, but you don't get as much supervision because of the designs, right? So you can go up to a certain size, maintain line of sight, supervision, and all that. So you're really maximizing your adults in custody ratio to your staff. You go too small, you need the same staff, but you don't have the capacity. You go too big, then you need more staff, right? So we were really looking at those models when we picked the size of the jail to be, about 800 beds. And then, you look at, how to run a jail, and just because you have 800 beds doesn't mean you get 800 people. And, you really run about 15 to 20% under your capacity for classification issues. So for instance, you have somebody who's been arrested or accused of a sex offense, especially, say a child sex offense. They have to be in a different part of the jail than general population, because they could be assaulted or whatnot. Or people with mental health issues may not be suitable to be housed in a group housing environment because of what they're dealing with. And you could turn a single or a double cell or a quad cell into a single cell, depending on who's in jail at the time. So you really need that flexibility. And then you need classification in other ways, like, is this a first-time offender, or is this a career criminal? You want to separate those people within the facility, and you can't always dictate how many you're going to hold of each or how many come in with, we have an idea because of historical lodgings, but you never know what will come. So a lot of factors go into the size, right? And again, building a facility for today, when it will open 4 years from now and then need to be in service for another 50 years, it doesn't make sense to build the exact number that will work today, because I really think you're doing a disservice to the people that are investing in this project, which are the taxpayers.
Well, and what a bummer that we didn't do the construction funding back before the rest of COVID ran up all the construction prices, because I'm sitting here listening and wondering what the jail would cost now compared to what it would have been if we had funded it on the last election cycle.
Well, and the same thing will stand true for the next election cycle. And that's why we need to kind of stay on this thing. Just because I'm a guy that doesn't just run out and vote for every levy, everything. I mean, honestly, it has to be important. I'm a taxpayer and I pay a lot of taxes right now. But this is something that is important, and it affects our livability more than I could ever even say on here. And, you know, do you have any numbers at all on, and I know that's kind of hitting you on the spot, but as far as how many of these people that are running around the streets, at least that you guys come in contact with, that are from around here, maybe they're just coming here because they understand that there's not enough beds, that if you get in trouble, you're just going to get kicked back out on the street, and we're just going to feed you and give you a hotel to stay in rather than a.
Yeah, we know that there's I can't give you the exact numbers today, but maybe we could, you know, get that for a future show potentially. But we know we have a pretty large population of those who come to our jail have what's called a transient listing for address, meaning they don't have a permanent address. Now, there's things that do affect that, right? So there's somebody who's homeless, obviously would fit into that category. But there's also people that don't always tell us the truth because they don't want to be found later. So they don't give us an address. And when that happens, if they refuse to tell us, you know, maybe they're under the influence of drugs, alcohol, or just antisocial or mental health issue, you know, they don't give an address, and then they have to be listed as transient. So it's not like perfect information when you say, hey, 40% of the people that came in or 50% were listed as transient. A good deal could be transient, meaning they don't have a home, but some could be also just not wanting to provide information so they could be found later, essentially, if they don't appear. So we do have a bit of people not being honest. But regardless, we do have a significant amount of people that come in that are transient. Now, clarifying where they came from prior to that, that's the harder part. As far as collecting the data. Now, it could be extra steps, but, you know, we deal with, you know, anywhere from, you know, I think our low during COVID was like 8,500 lodgings, bookings in a year, and our highs are about 14,000 prior to COVID. So you're talking about a lot of information to get from people about, you know, where they came from, how long they've been here. So anecdotally speaking, you know, we do know that we do have people here from other parts of either Oregon or the country. And we do have people that have moved here because there are resources and there are very lax drug laws. So frankly, you know, people don't want to be bothered or arrested for possessing drugs. And Oregon has made that pretty easy with Measure 110.
That was going to be one of my questions, because when that Measure 110 was on the ballot, a lot of folks, including people in the real estate world, were concerned that it would attract folks from other parts of the United States, specifically to be in a more relaxed drug situation. And so I think that's why Guy and I are just kind of curious, but I get it. It's hard to track where people are from.
And then out of all of Oregon, we kind of have the best climate down here also. Half the rain they get up in Eugene. So if they got to be in a state, unfortunately, now they're down here where we're going to have the best weather on top of everything else.
Yeah,
so,
true. That's a good point too. You know, and we see that from other parts of the country. The West Coast is desirable compared to other parts of the country because of the climate. And out of Oregon, you know, we probably have one of the more mild or at least balanced climates there is.
The banana belt. That's part of why we love Southern Oregon. So going back to the possible future jail funding, if that were to come up again, do you know about what ballot year it would be?
You know, I think 2025 would be about the soonest, honestly. They have a lot of work to do if we were to do that. So, you know, my pick of times would probably be like May of 2025. And I don't mind saying that because of a lot of reasons. One is, you know, the marketing campaign, the education campaign, the getting all the cities involved, you know, it takes a lot of work. And, you know, last time we tried this, we got really compressed because we had a couple cities that weren't excited about this project, and it took a lot of additional work, like 6 months worth of meetings and whatnot to try to educate people on what this would do for our community and how much of a need it was. And so I think having 2 years is about the minimum amount to try to accomplish all of this and do it effectively. So that would be 2 years from now, so May 2025. And then of course, you don't really want to mess around in the presidential election, because I just think you just have just too much going on, too much distractions to focus on this issue for just our community. You have a lot of national things going on, and I think obviously the politics have been very divisive over the past few years, and to me, this issue can be divisive, but it shouldn't be, because we're coming together as a community in Jackson County to improve things. Exactly. And so I just feel like you're trying to really conquer a lot of challenges if you were to jump in the same pool with what's going to happen nationally.
Well, we've got to take a quick break, folks. We're talking to Jackson County Sheriff Nate Sickler. We're so grateful to have him come on, because public safety and livability affects real estate. Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors. Don't go away. Well, welcome back to the Real Estate Show, folks. Glad you could join us today. We have Jackson County Sheriff Nate Sickler and Guy Giles on the show. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming back.
Hey, thanks a lot. Just kind of touching on what you were talking about before, I was heading into town earlier today and looking over at, a couple of the hotels, or mainly the one big one that they've changed over. And I believe that's just a lot of homeless people in there. And it still feels like there's twice as many people on the street. And I know it's not, because you guys are not doing what you're supposed to do. But I mean, on some level, are we just attracting people here by making it so comfortable, kind of feeding the ducks, so to speak? I just don't know how to reconcile that in my brain, as far as the more comfortable we make it for everybody. I think I'd rather have a jail cell than a hotel room if you do something wrong.
I think there's a lot of truth in that. Certainly, I think the more resources you provide, you certainly, the flip side to that coin is attracting people to come get, free stuff or resources. Now, in some cases, obviously, if somebody's reaching out for help, you don't want to be like, well, hey, you're not from here, so we're not going to help. But on the other hand, if you make the help so easy, or there's no restrictions, or there's no accountability with it, it makes it tough to really make progress, and it really does impact the livability for the rest of the community, as you just noted.
Oh man.
And so I don't know, that is a delicate balance, because the urban camp that was put in years ago in Medford, there was a that and it still has a pretty good vetting process through the Medford livability team, but it almost feels like the forest fire is getting out of control with regards to the homeless, and there needs to be additional things done, obviously.
But that campground, doesn't that vet and have drug and alcohol rules?
Yeah, so part of it is it would be considered low barrier, but not a free for all, right? So if you're under the influence, they're not going to turn you away unless you're being disruptive and out of control.
Oh, I see.
But they don't allow active use inside. So if you show up and you're under the influence, they're not going to turn you away if you need somewhere to go, but they're not going to actively let you shoot up or do drugs or drink alcohol in the camp.
But see, as a citizen, that I would be okay with that. That sounds
and that's a good model. I mean, obviously you're not going to change that type of behavior instantaneously, the addiction. And so, I don't advocate for it, obviously, but I think there is a balance between, no barrier seems to be pretty dangerous. Low barrier in some instances can be effective. And then it really needs to be, in my opinion, now I know there's counter opinions. people will probably state, I think it's Sweden that does a different model of housing first, but the government subsidizes all of that, right? So that's not necessarily a sustainable model forever, because it's expensive to give everybody a house that doesn't have one. And I think it changes the message of what this country was kind of founded upon, which was hard work and take care of yourself and self-responsibility and all those things. And then it's really moving into this other model that doesn't seem to be very sustainable for a lot of places.
Mhm.
Well, and I've actually served food for a lot of years down at the Medford Gospel Mission, and it was always really busy over there. And we're finding out lately that a lot of people aren't going there, and that's one of those places that there is accountability when it comes to being clean and sober to be part of that program. So if there's a ton of other places where you can go and you don't have to have that accountability, I don't think it's because less people are partying or using or doing whatever. It's because there's just a more fun place for them to be while they're still engaging in what they're doing. So I don't know, what the right answer is, but it's just, anyway, I'm just grateful for guys like you that are, trying to do something that'll actually work. Attracting more doesn't seem to be the answer.
Well, and people who are actively using, their focus is on using. And I don't think I'm out of line saying that. They just have a different mindset. So if we're providing options for people, but it requires you to be clean and sober, then it's almost like there's another step missing between the person who's actively using and getting them at least to a mindset where they can start looking to become sober and self-reliant.
Yeah, I'm really, in a perfect world or perfect valley, the model that I think would be the most effective for our community as a whole, right? And so when we're in meetings, we talk about three goals that we'd love to see us aim towards, right? Always aim towards. And sometimes we can't make those, but nonetheless, you got to have something you're striving for. And that's, okay, can we reduce the homeless problem overall? There's one. And then can we improve outcomes for those experience homelessness? But the most important is, can we improve livability for the community? So can the community thrive as well, and not just focus on the individuals who are homeless, but we need to focus on the 95 or 90% of the people who are paying the bills, who are going about their day, and make it palatable and livable for them, because that's what our focus needs to be. And so I think oftentimes in certain areas or pieces of the government that gets forgotten. The people who are doing what they need to do, doing what essentially trying to contribute to the betterment of our community, often get left out of the discussion or out of the equation as to how it impacts them. And so that's one thing we really try to direct and say, hey, now is it perfect? No, because there's a lot of other factors that make it really hard to make it better for the community every day. But if you could have an accountability piece attached to the resource piece, meaning we have a lot of people who simply just don't want to take the resources. And I think people are hesitant in some regards, or they've had bad experiences in some regards. Okay, I get that. But at the same token, we have to consider the livability piece in our other community. And it's like, if you're going to be out causing problems, littering, putting trash in the creeks, creating fire hazards, stealing, trespassing, being disorderly, that's not good for our community as a whole. And there needs to be the other side of this coin, which is either, hey, get resources and we'll help you, we'll motivate you. But on the other end of that, there's the jail and there's consequences. And then we can try to push people into those social resources, social services through criminal justice system.
There is going to be a piece of this whole new jail thing, wasn't there, that's going to address kind of helping people move them in the right direction as far as that goes?
Yeah, I was wondering that too.
Yeah, so we had a pretty significant enhancement budgeted through the district for the jail, the funding. for mental health and addiction services. So to really bolster that up compared to what we have now. And, the system that we were, striving to do and to build, obviously, would be to have our systems ready to braid to the outside systems, the social services. So, for instance, someone comes into jail, they're addicted to fentanyl, or heroin at the time was more prevalent than fentanyl, but any drug really, but be able to hold on to them long enough to where they could actually make a decision that was beneficial to their well-being. Because in our current system, and even with some of the current Oregon laws, is they come in and they go out. And so they just really go back into the street in the same state of mind that they came in, which is not healthy, right? I mean, they're not making good decisions, so they're getting arrested. So they go, if we had a bigger facility and then they could be held, they have time to get sober, right? And then once they have time to get sober, they can start thinking in a different way.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
And then that's when they could be susceptible to accepting resources, right? And then you can offer things such as like medication assisted treatment, if you have the budget, the time, and the space, to where you can really give them a significant advantage when they leave the facility, and then they tie into the social services, the addiction services outside. And so there's this clean handoff, so to speak, where, they leave our facility in a better place than they came in, and now they're more ripe or ready for accepting services on the outside.
Yeah,
and all the while,
awesome.
All the while, the community isn't being impacted. So that's the other piece, right? They're not out causing problems. They're not out trespassing. They're not being disorderly. They're not stealing people's stuff. They're not engaged in other activity that affects livability. So it's really a win-win for everybody. But it's really hard to, I think, explain that in a way that 200,000 people in Jackson County really clearly, because everyone hears things a little differently. Everyone has a little bit different idea how it should be. And in law enforcement, we have challenges because there's been issues across the country that have been magnified, and even here a little bit. So sometimes there's a lack of trust, right? And they think that law enforcement is a hammer and everything's a nail, and that's not really what it's about. And so we as a law enforcement community deal with people every day and challenges, and have a front row seat to all these things, and are probably the most experienced in dealing with the challenges that these individuals bring. But yet at the end of the day, some of those experiences are discounted for somebody who has a different opinion but's never worked in the field.
So I'm kind of, first of all, I was surprised that the jail didn't pass last time. And I think it would have helped, especially with this medicated assistance program. I think it would have helped the humans that are on the street tremendously. I'm just curious what some of the objections were to this. Was it mostly financial?
So I think you come from two different places, and this is what makes a project like this hard or difficult. Is one, you deal with people that are just opposed to the jail as a whole and doesn't believe that that's the best way to go about treating.
Oh, so like philosophically?
Yeah, philosophically, jail's bad, prisons are bad, and we just need to come up with a whole different approach. We need to be upstream. We need to get ahead of these problems before they become these problems, which, hey, I think these things are good in theory, right? But I think it needs to be this meshed transition. You can't just cut one off and then start the other, because you're too late. So you need to really have both for a long time to be effective and change the ideas. And then that's a whole different conversation. But people really want to see the resources, the money go into these other things. Well, the problem is what a lot of people don't realize is there's basically this premise that addiction is going to be criminalized, and not necessarily dealt with in the right way. And I know we got to take a break coming up, so we can pick this back up if you'd like.
Yep, absolutely. We're speaking with Jackson County Sheriff Nate Sickler, Guy Giles, Mutual Mortgage. We want to say a quick thanks to our sponsors, John L. Scott, Ashland, and Medford, the local Rogue Valley Association of Realtors, known as RVAR, and Guy Giles, Neutral Mortgage. Thank you all for bringing this show every week. And just a quick reminder, it will be aired again on the same station, KCMX 99.5, tomorrow, Sunday at 6 p.m. Don't go away. We've got more of Sheriff Nate Sickler. Don't touch that dial. Welcome back, folks, to the Real Estate Show, Southern Oregon. We're so lucky to have Jackson County Sheriff Nate Sickler and Guy Giles on the show today. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So right before the break, we were talking about some of what the pushback from the jail was for last election cycle. You had some thoughts you wanted to wrap up?
Yeah.
Sheriff
So
Sickler?
just real quick, it's you're fighting this two-pronged thing. One is how do you pay for it? Right. And so you talk about one area, which is, I get it. It taxes, right? And so, but that's really the only way to pay for a sustained operation. So you kind of deal with that challenge on that side of the fence, and then you deal with the people that just don't like jail. We talked a little bit about that, but who believe we're trying to criminalize addiction, and that's why Measure 110 passed. But it's really not that. When people are addicted, that's a different thing than when people are addicted and now victimizing the community. Right. And that's where the delineation needs to be made, is like, we don't come into your house and arrest you for drinking too much beer at night, but we will arrest you if you go out and drive drunk and hit somebody's car, or go out in the neighborhood and shoot your gun off and wildly because you're intoxicated. And so those are two different things, right? And then the other is the mental health piece, but we've seen so much increase of that because of the drug use. They're all tied together. And so it's a very convoluted topic, but really, at the end of the day, all these systems suffer if one system isn't adequate to help the other. And so this ecosystem that we need to create. So that's another day. We could talk more about that later, but essentially, the taxes on one end and then the anti-jail on the other, whereas those people sometimes sit in different camps, right? So people might be willing to pay taxes, but not for jail, or people might want to put people in jail and law and order, but don't want to pay taxes. So that's our challenge.
So, and I'm sorry, Guy. Go
I was
ahead.
just gonna say, I think a lot of it is perception when it comes to the people coming here too. And what I mean by that is, if word gets out on the street that we're gonna convert 6 more hotels to comfortable places for people to live, that's a little different narrative when they're talking to their friends on the road or whatever about, hey, we're gonna build a jail that's really gonna focus on, if you do something wrong, we're gonna be able to put you in there, and also maybe try to help you get off of drugs. So I know if I'm out there doing my thing, I'm not necessarily going to go to a town that's, going to try to get me sober if I don't want to get sober. But again, it's just like, it seems like we have put so much energy and money into just making it comfortable for everybody, that this is the kind of answer that we're looking for, is to have a place that will address, some of the addictions that are out there, and also have a place to lock you up if you do something wrong.
Well, and we're watching live in action across the country, some of these other programs that were applied in bigger cities, and not being political, because we're not a political show, but just being a matter of fact of watching the success or lack of success when they scale these programs and then find out if they work or not. And one of the issues we had in Southern Oregon was the cannabis. And it wasn't just that we made it legal, it's that some of the operations were not functioning the way they were supposed to. And I remember a couple years ago, you wrote a fantastic letter to the landlords, and I thought it was very balanced. But I wondered kind of how that came to be, and what the outcome was.
Yeah. So, just really quickly, we identified a lot of problems between our IMET team of what they were encountering ground level, and then we also had 2 deputies who worked on a COPS grant, and that's like a community-oriented policing grant. It's come from the federal government, and they do some things out in the rural areas, and they were actually the first in our county to work marijuana issues when this first started, because we didn't have an IMET team at the time. We didn't have any resources. So between all those things, those guys really kind of came up with the ideas, maybe we should send out a letter and do something to like basically put people on notice, because we're having a hard time with any prosecutions, any fines, anything like that. So that idea spurred from there. I drafted the letter, and then we sent it out in the tax rolls, the tax letters, and we had mostly great feedback. People were like, well, thank you for doing this. This is helpful. This is going to put people on notice.
They probably didn't know.
Some. And then we had some people that were mad, right? They call me up and say, well, what do you mean you're going to cite and arrest landowners? I go, well, that's not exactly what we said, but we said, some people were spending more time vetting the color they were going to paint their house, and this is a true story, than they did of who was going to grow what on their land, and just took the $50,000 or $60,000.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of that old adage, if it's too good to be true, it probably is. And so we basically wanted to put out hey, people aren't aware, this is a way you can become aware, and this is one way we can communicate to you in addition to social media and news and all the other things we do. But I think overall it had a good impact, meaning I think the result was beneficial. And then when you combine that with all the other efforts, I think they all go hand in hand.
Yeah, I think it was greatly successful. And from the landowners that I spoke to, many of them did not understand the legal consequences of the tenants that they chose to be on their property. And that goes for even in town. It's like who you pick to live in your house or on your land matters, and the community will suffer if you're not taking good care.
Correct. Yeah.
So how are things now in the cannabis world for you guys?
Well, you know what? I'll let Guy talk on this, because I can tell you from my perspective, I think things are better than 2021, because that was kind of like the peak. But Guy sits on the marijuana advisory committee. Guy drives around the community. Guy had people in the area where, I'll just let him talk to it, because he comes from
honestly, it's been night and day. I mean, from a community standpoint out there. I mean, I feel for the first time, these guys couldn't even get to maybe 10% of probably less than that, the grows, when it was just going crazy out there. But, a combination of that Senate Bill 3000 and getting Nate and these guys some resources to do it. I barely smell the stuff anymore. I couldn't even go to sleep in my neighborhood without it. And it was pretty miserable around here, just watching all these people claiming to grow hemp. And I think they've done an awesome job, but it just does go to show that if we put the right resources into doing something, we can make even the homeless thing that we talked about for the whole first half of the show a lot better with the right resources, if we trust people like Nate to do what really needs to be done. And I've known him for years now, and it's not it doesn't all have to be a punitive thing. It's not like all of a sudden we always want to execute people in the streets. That might be my idea, but it's never been his. And it's just, there is a better way to do this. And we've seen it with the marijuana. I think anybody that's lived here since the inception of the whole let's make it legal thing will realize that it is a ton better than it was. And anyway, these guys are making an impact on the other part too. So,
and from a real estate standpoint, I think a lot of us brokers out there in the field will attest that it ran off the ones that were not following the rules. It's one thing to be legally growing and following the rules and being a good citizen, and it's another, to be breaking the law and using water the way you weren't. So, so we were all very grateful. And we're glad to have a more sustainable cannabis industry now.
Well, yeah, and getting the OLCC involved where they at least had some kind of teeth also. If you walked onto a grow and just said, hey, I'm not doing anything correct, they had to turn around and leave. So there has been some really good things that these guys have done.
Well, Sheriff Nate Sickler, thank you so much for being on the show today. Guy Giles, thank you so much for being on the show. And we're out of time. We'd love to have you back maybe later in the summer, Sheriff.
Yeah. Hey, whenever you guys have opportunity, let me know. I'm always happy to update our community on what's going on.
Thank you so much. Have a beautiful Southern Oregon weekend, folks. Bye now.